Oh, hello. You've attended. Good evening.
I'll be all around.
It was actually almost to the date this time of year. It was a New Year's Eve party, uh, 1973 going into 1974. I was 20 years old. It was a party, and I had spent weeks prior to that. I, I, I don't know. I'm older than you are. This happened in the 70s where there was a lot of drugs being taken. I was working in a place that was owned by some old hippies, and the drugs were just flowing every day. And that's how we entertained ourselves. We would
Yeah.
just get high every day, and people would bring in their best stuff. So I was doing that for must have been like a month prior, building up to this,
Hmm.
to where that night, which I took a lot, different variety of things.
Hmm.
I just felt like I was just. There was a small New Year's Eve party, and I was with a girlfriend. I said, I'm just going to lay down for a few minutes. I felt really just suddenly exhausted. And so I just laid on a nice bit of carpet, strangely between two Buddha statues.
Oh yeah.
um, and just almost, it was pretty much immediate. I felt like the floor drop out from under me. And I was just suspended. I felt my heart stop beating. I could feel it. I stopped breathing. I was out. Um, the There are a few things that I haven't mentioned in other interviews. The line between life and death is just beyond razor thin. It's almost like we don't even know it. It's just so continuous. It's like we've always been there. That's where it was. That's how it was for me.
Mhm.
Like as if, oh, of course I know this. I've always been here. Um, I didn't miss the life I just left. I didn't remember it anymore. The memory, everything was just gone with the body, mind, all that left. But I was in the midst of this remarkable experience of just pure ecstasy. So incredible. I didn't want anything else. I felt just complete. And there was brilliant colors. I was just immersed. And I was part of it, of just color, light, swirling colors. And the ecstasy was just so, I don't even have a way to describe it. The greatest pleasure we know in this life is not even a drop in the bucket compared to this, this level of ecstatic feeling that I had. Um, so I stayed in that state for quite a while. Um, and then I felt like I don't know how it happens. I mean, I'm not thinking, but I came back in my body, took a deep breath, and wanted to leave again. And so I left, stopped breathing again, heart stopped again, and I was gone for must have been another like 5 or 10 minutes. During that time, which the girlfriend I was with told me that the next day that she said everyone in the room saw this. Um, Light left my body. It was like a stream of light and swirled around the room the whole time I was dead. Um, I, I had no thought or memory of it because I was dead. um, and um, and so there was like an intuition, like a just not a thought, but like and an intuition again came to me that if I didn't come back, it was my last chance to come back. I wouldn't live anymore. The life would be over. And it's just through pure volition. It wasn't through thought again. I didn't make a conscious decision, but it was like through this act of volition. I was back in my body. I took a breath. I opened my eyes, and I was never the same. I mean, from that day on, I've never been the same since then. I was just kind of left trying to figure out what sorry, there's a bunch of noise. I was trying to figure out what had happened to me. And it took many years. I was dysfunctional for a very long time because of it. I mean, I couldn't really hold a job or anything. I was kind of like I was always half in the clouds. I left me a lot more psychic, where I could just, I could oftentimes feel what people were thinking. Um, and pretty accurately too, I think. Um, and so that left me just feeling too oversensitive. Like in crowds, it was just overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. um, so yeah, so I had, and following, like in the months following, I had many experiences where I was out of body because I was still kind of half in this world and half out. And so I would just like lay down to fall asleep. I'd be out my body flying. I one time I flew with an angel, um, and she looked almost like you would expect, translucent, beautiful, angelic. She was like just right in front of me. We just kind of like flew up. And I remember she reached over and touched me. And I, again, was just filled with ecstasy when she did that, filled with this feeling of pure love. Um, and then I just opened my eyes and I was back in my body. From that type of thing happened probably for the next few years on a pretty regular basis.
Um, Born and raised in Romania, so it happened in Romania. I was a teenager at the time, about 14-ish. And we were going to the Black Sea as we always went on vacations. We had two options usually, and it was the mountains or the sea. So, and it was almost always that we would go with friends or family. It was like almost ever that it was just my small family or my parents and I. So it was a pretty decent group of us. And we went to this, trying to think how many people now. Hang on. 3 plus 3, 6. So 10 total. Of course, aunts and uncles and, family. And we went to a place, it's called Tekergyol. It has this mud. So you have the sea where you go to swim or wash, but there's some mud, and this mud is very, I don't know, it supposedly has some clinical benefits for rheumatoid arthritis. It's highly sulfuric. It stinks when you go in, and so I try to avoid it, right? My older women would go there, so the mothers and the aunts, they would always be there, and I refused to go. So I stayed with the men, which meant my stepdad was in charge of me directly. And he was trying to teach me how to swim. We were not that far along because it wouldn't stick with me. Anything that takes talent, don't try it with me. So I could float. I could float on my back, and probably small distances, but I couldn't really control my body very well in the water. So we were going for another training episode so I can learn to swim better. The water is very black there. It's very dirty because everybody washes that mud in the water. So it spreads all over. You can't really see much in the water. It's pitch black. So I was floating on my back to gain some depth so we could start training. And he was walking. He was walking. I thought he was swimming. Maybe half a meter to a meter behind me, but in front of me as I was floating backwards. So I could see him. I could see him coming. And at one point, he went under the water. I thought he's drowning. That was my first thought because my stepdad was highly trained, military trained to swim. I knew he's not having a swimming problem. I thought it's something with his health. So my biological father passed away when I was 3 months old. I didn't get to really meet him to have personal experience. He passed away of a massive heart attack with an aorta explosion, I believe. So my first thought was that my stepdad is now leaving me and he's dying too. And so I panicked to go help him out of the water. Well, I couldn't even handle myself very well. So I went under. I just bled out. Remember a couple of moments of panic. I think I was above and under the water at different times. I couldn't tell exactly what's happening. It was pretty impactful. And then suddenly it stopped. I went into a total quiet place, basically, where you couldn't hear anything. Or the way I would say it now, I have to say that everything I say is my own interpretation and my own personal view with this experience. I think I felt like I was losing my senses, my physical senses one by one, and my hearing went first. But I enjoyed the peacefulness and the quietness. It was surprisingly nice. I felt like I just flipped with my face down from floating backwards in the water. Like all of a sudden now I'm floating, but facing down and seeing into the water. And it's pitch black and it's very quiet. And but through that blackness of what I thought is the water, later I've seen other people explain it as a tunnel or some dark space before you go into the tunnel. I don't know exactly how we can break that down, but so that's actually what I was experiencing. I could see my body drowning. It was just sinking down deeper and deeper into the water. And I watched it from the level of the water. The way I interpret this is that I was kind of limited, restricted to the medium in which my body was dying, my biological body was dying in. So I could see it from that point of view of the surface of the water. I didn't care much. It was just like a shell. Not like I shouldn't say that I didn't care much about the body. It's like a shell. It's like a shell. It's like a temple. It's everything, but you don't need it. That's not you. It's like a BMW expensive car or something that you used and now you're done. You don't need it. It just goes. Not long after staring at my body sinking, and I could see my hair floating up. And later on, that would link into what my dad describes. He's saying that he first caught my hair because that's what he could see first. So at that point in time, and it almost feels like I got bored of looking at the body, or I knew what's going to happen to it. Let's move on. I'll never forget. I saw a little sparkle, kind of like a lightning bug. Caught it with the corner of my right eye. I'll never forget. It was on the right corner. And in the beginning, it was blinking, then it became bigger and bigger, but I was also flying towards it. At that point in time, I realized I'm the same material as whatever that warp of light is. So I realized that's my new home now that I got rid of the car and whatever I had here. So the way I can describe, and no, words don't do justice. We don't have enough words in any human language. I speak a few languages, and I can't find words to describe what I felt and exactly how it was in any language. But we can try, right? We can only try.
This is something that I've written about and finally talked about, but for 30 years I was silent. I'm going to preface my near-death experience and take you back to 1972 when I was 12 years old. I was a horse-crazy kid, still am a horse-crazy adult. I went horseback riding at a local stable, and they put me on a horse that was just way, way too much for kid, and the horse took off with me, couldn't stop it, stayed on, managed to stay on. The horse ran up to the highway, and the hooves hit that hot tar pavement just like hitting black ice. The horse flipped in the air, and just before I was crushed between the horse and the pavement, I went out of body. I was slingshot behind my body and about 6 feet from the ground and very parallel to myself. I saw the back of my wavy hair, and my vision was much, much clearer than my 20/20 vision that I have in, physical reality here. So I was seeing everything so clearly, and I could make out my hair and the little green tank top my mother had just made me, and my brand new blue jeans, and even the dried out pine needles in the nearby trees. And it was like swoosh, right back in my body as the horse was coming down on top of me, and we were sliding across the highway. I went out of body, and boy, I went right back in to feel every amount of pain you can imagine with compound fractures of the knee and the ankle and the leg. It was so shocking to be out of body that almost distracted me from the tragedy, that I was living. The horse got up, and everybody's always asked me when I've told them. They're all worried about the horse, not the poor kid that got smushed, but the horse recovered. The horse was fine. Horse was pretty banged up, but she recovered. I got up and hopped on one leg back to the barn because nobody came for me. Nobody came to help me. The employees rushed out and got the horse, and I was forgotten. But what I could never forget was that I left my body just before this accident. And I couldn't talk about it because it was too shocking. And I was afraid that somebody would call me a liar or an exaggerator or something like that. I couldn't even tell my own mom for many years. And that was my first out-of-body experience. Then I had the big accident at 19. I went out to Centerville, Virginia, to a place I used to ride a lot at, and took a horse out that was above my abilities and was riding for, an hour or so, and met up with some people on the trail. We decided to have a great, bright idea to race our horses back to the barn. Not a good thing. I was wearing a helmet and boots. I knew how to ride. I was going very fast on this horse, and the horse stumbled, and I went flying, I went airborne into a ditch with rocks, head first. And as I was leaving, I was tilting off to my right side. I knew I was going to fall. That dread. I knew it was going to happen. You just take these risks when you ride horses. And I never hit the ground because I left my body, John, and went into this pit, this dark tunnel at a very high rate of speed. I had no sensation of my physical body hitting the ground, which I'm very glad about. I'm glad to miss that one. This was my near-death experience, my pivotal moment in my life, the moment that changed everything. All my perspective, my whole foundation of what reality was turned upside down, and my core beliefs shifted. So it was a great blessing. I wish I could have skipped the injuries, but I went out of body into this tunnel. And then the most wonderful thing on earth happened. I was reunited with my late grandfather, Papa. And he didn't have any of the ravages of cancer that had taken his life when I was 12. He was just as loving and fantastic there as he had been. And there was no, even though it had been a few years since he died, there was no, his love for me hadn't diminished. It had only strengthened. And our bond had only gotten stronger, as weird as it sounds. but he was just the most wonderful person on earth to me. He was my biggest hero. So talking about him, I have to control what I say because I do tend to cry. To see him gave me wonderful comfort. As distressed as I was because I was, when I was going through the dark tunnel, because, I was 19 years old. I had like 2 boyfriends at the time. And I had a cool job working at a nightclub, my own apartment, my own crappy car. I was, independent, and life had just gotten interesting. So to lose that was like a tremendous core grief that you have when you feel like you have lost your opportunity to live when life was just getting good. But what was so beautiful was there was my grandfather. And it was worth it.